Okay, it's been a while since I've talked some Jujutsu Kaisen. The manga right now is well over, I believe, 100 chapters, and I've been having a blast with it. And I found this interview that was translated. I'll have the link to the person that translated it below because they definitely deserve credit. I found a really interesting interview that I wanted to read and share with you guys and kind of give my thoughts on it, because one of the things about this interview, or let me just paint you a picture. The author compares their work and talks about the big three of the back in the day, which I love the fact that this author recognizes the big three was Naruto, One Piece, and Bleach. A lot of people get that confused. So the author compares Jujutsu Kaisen to that, talks about the influence of them, talks about the influence from My Hero Academia, talks about the influence from one of my all-time favorite anime, period, YuYu Hakusho, talks about how Yoshihiro Togashi is basically the GOAT. Just so much from this interview that I honestly felt while I was reading it, like, God damn, this author sounds a lot like me. Like, holy shit. No, by no means am I saying I'm writing Jujutsu Kaisen. Please, I ain't talented by far to be able to do that, but I found it awesome, and I don't think I've ever said that about an author before, that, like, I relate that much just reading the interests and the thoughts that this author had at the time. So yeah, we're gonna read this interview and talk about some Jujutsu Kaisen. It's well overdue.
I say we gonna do what we do, no matter how you move, make your move. That's how it be though.
Okay, so quickly before we get into the Jujutsu Kaisen interview, I want to throw in there a couple of thoughts about the manga recently. Since my last video, which I made ages ago already, it's almost been a year, I want to say, since I talked about Jujutsu Kaisen. A lot of great shit that went down, man. The backstory of Gojo, finding out about Gojo. Like, first of all, Gojo, probably one of my faves of the story, to be honest with you. I love me some Gojo, I'm not gonna lie. Like, Itadori though, Yuji Itadori, Megumi, Fushiguro. I think one of my favorite things, and I like to call him Jujutsu Kaisen's Madara, is, spoiler alert, by the way, just quickly, you could skip over this by like 10 seconds if you don't want to know about this. Fushiguro's father. Oh my gosh, bro. Fushiguro's father, that dude is like Madara. The way he took over that dude's body and he's staying around and shit like that, it's been insane. The Jujutsu Kaisen manga, the only reason I really haven't made a big video is it's gonna take a lot of time because this is a really complex series. The fighting styles, the zones, all of that shit takes a lot, and that's why I really haven't made a video about it, because otherwise I would have. Jujutsu Kaisen is amazing, and after reading this interview, I am that much more dedicated to supporting Jujutsu Kaisen and the author, because it's that damn good. So without further ado, let's start reading it. Again, there's a lot to cover, so I'm going to try my best to read it as quickly as possible and not interrupt the interview as much as possible so we can get through it, but it's very interesting and enjoyable, so there's that. Let's read. And just lastly, before we start, I'm not sure if the author is a woman or a man. I've heard both. I've heard that it was confirmed at Jump Festa 2019 that it's a man. I've seen my anime list, the drawing that they have is a woman. So again, I'm not sure of the identity. It could be two people posing as one. I don't know. But yeah, just wanted to throw that in there. They asked, when did you start reading manga? I think I got my first manga when I was around 8. My parents offered me the 6th volume of the comic series Takeshi, no idea what's that, to stop me from whining too much while on a family trip. At home, I was able to read some Dragon Ball, YuYu Hakusho, or Kochikame, all bought by my older brother, I think. Dragon Ball, YuYu Hakusho, and Kochikame. Kochikame is funny because that was like a Japanese classic. People really didn't get into that in the States over here. I don't think it even ever made it. When did you start getting into drawing? I changed schools in 4th grade and met a friend who adored manga. Discussing with her gave me the desire to draw. In college, it was more difficulty to show my love for manga since I was embarrassed, even when deep down I knew I wanted to make it my career. I started crafting real stories much later when I got into university and got to draw my first manga from start to end. In senior high school, I followed classes in a school even though art school wasn't my goal. I was lazy with my studies, so I had to look for a university I could get into easily. The one I was accepted in specialized in video production, and knowing how to draw wasn't necessary. Did you take scenario writing classes there? No, I mostly learned to do editing using editing software, and that's it. An upperclassman friend of mine was the reason I got interested in creating actual storylines. He watched a lot of movies and read a lot of manga and novels. He had the knack to explain what he liked or disliked in each work. I found it fascinating. Thanks to him, I started analyzing the shows I saw and trained so I could convey how they made me feel. It's a skill that helps me a lot even today. You went the manga way in your last year of university then? I was already drawing storyboards with my friends at the faculty. We would exchange opinions on our respective stories even when I couldn't ever finish one of my own. I realized it was time to get serious in my last year at university. I saw that Shueisha was organizing manga contests. I chose to participate in the Akatsuka Award contest for gag manga. I sent them a regular story mixed with comedy, but it didn't really work well with the content style. Despite that, the man who would later become my first editor liked my story and assured me that my work would pass the selection phase. He was right, but the final step was more difficult. In the end, I didn't receive the prize money, but the jury found my story interesting, which helped get me published in one of Shueisha's special issues. That strategy right there, to be honest with you, like strategizing of like, okay, I'm gonna do a serious work to get their attention and mix some comedy so I can enter this contest. Like that's dope. And again, that's something I would do, be like, how do I show off my true skills while entering this contest to like knock them away? Like that's dope. Shueisha was your goal from the start then? While I was going to university, I read a lot of various magazines trying to prepare myself. Since I grew up with Jump, I thought that the shonen genre would fit my style more. I've been buying the magazine ever since my university days. It's the only pre-publication magazine that I always read entirely. I was afraid I wouldn't know anything about the editorial line if I was to apply anywhere else. I chose Shueisha without hesitation. Makes sense. You do your homework, you find out about something, you stick with it, you kick its ass. You also worked as Yasuhiro Kano's assistant on the manga Kiss X Death. How do you find that experience? Which Kiss X Death, I'm not sure which series that is, but I think that was like a romance series. After my first story got published, my editor suggested I work as an assistant under Yasuhiro Kano. I was terrified, not feeling like I could do it. Mr. Kano draws very well. With the rise of digital art, more and more artists can draw as a neat and precise way, yet very few have really mastered the basics of drawing. Mr. Yasuhiro has thin and aesthetically pleasing lines which can appeal to both general public and otakus alike. I wanted to say no for fear that I would disappoint him. More precisely, my plan was to go there and never get called back there again. I'm sorry, that was funny. I like this dude, or female, whatever, you know. I'm gonna say dude, and I'm referring to whether it's a female or a male. I thought for sure they would never suggest I return there, yet Mr. Kano did. In the end, I worked under him for 2 years. What did you do mostly? Mr. Kano usually has the same person handle all the necessary work to finish a page. The workload isn't divided, like for example having one person establishing the framework, another drawing the backgrounds. You get a whole page to work on. Consequently, I learned about everything I needed to finalize a manuscript from him. What Jump series did you read originally? This part right here is where it starts getting really interesting for me. First, Dragon Ball. Then I read Naruto, One Piece, and Bleach, which were the 3 pillars for a long time. So for people that say, oh, that they weren't the big, yes, they were. The 3 pillars, aka the big 3 that held up Jump, okay? Like, give Bleach its props. Stop shitting on Bleach. You know, years ago it was funny. It's not funny anymore. The anime's returning. We're doing our thing, baby. I've been reading those Jump series to some extent since around 2004. I was influenced by a lot of them, but I'm a big fan of the Sensui cycle in YuYu Hakusho. Hold the phone. I'm breaking right there. I was influenced by a lot of them, but I'm a big fan of the Sensui cycle in YuYu Hakusho. Anybody that knows me knows that I regard the Sensui arc and the Dark Tournament, but really the Sensui arc in YuYu Hakusho as one of the best, not only Shonen Jump stories, but one of the best stories in general, one of the best arcs in manga and anime. Well, more so anime. I'm not the biggest Yu Yu Hakusho manga fan, admittedly, but that anime arc is next to none, and especially from Jump stuff. That is one of the best stories ever told. So the fact that this dude loves that shit and is inspired by that makes me love Jujutsu Kaisen and this author even more. As well as Level E, another manga by Yoshihiro Togashi. I reread both regularly, and I've also seen Level E, very, very funny troll series by Yoshihiro Togashi, showcasing how diverse of a talent this dude is. Like, you go from a serious series like Yu Yu Hakusho or even Hunter x Hunter to a gag troll alien series like Level E. Like, Jujutsu Kaisen's author, fam. Jujutsu Kaisen's author. The Shinobu Sensui arc in Yu Yu Hakusho is a part that could be said to be in between shonen and seinen. Do you like that kind of style? I do. I'm attracted to works that bring something new to the table using different viewpoints. This kind of thing is what makes a person feel passion for a certain work. A basic rule of shonen is to start with a simple story, wait a little bit to introduce the darker subject, and then make the story more and more complex. Which is why Samurai 8 failed, unfortunately, because it started somewhat very, very early, kind of, okay, you know, shonen-y, very happy and shit, but it got complex within, like, the first chapter, to be honest with you. It's also a way to make your story original, and I love that. The Shinobu Sensui arc was very innovative and made me consider the notion of justice. At some point, I couldn't tell who was the target that needed to be defeated. At the end of the arc, when the villain is finally beaten, his partner says, "I'm exhausted. Find yourself another enemy to fight. I was shocked. I thought to myself, what's this manga? It's doing the opposite of every other existing shonen. I keep reading and rereading this story all the time, and I always discover something new. Oh my god, I love this author, man. That's me right there. Like, that is totally me. You know how many times I rewatched YuYu Hakusho again? And maybe not with the manga, but with the anime. Like, I rewatched it so many times, and every time I watch it, it's like, oh shit, I didn't realize that. Oh crap, like... And then the analytical viewpoint of the Sensui arc. This is why Jujutsu Kaisen is that high quality of writing, baby. This is why. What are your other influences outside of manga? In addition to anime, movies, and novels, I was also impressed by TV shows, and particularly the comedic genre. Some shows managed to make the spectators laugh in no time with little to no effort. Similarly, I tried to add some comedy in the manga. Moving on, I grew up with Evangelion. I really love the hero Shinji. Okay. To make a hero sympathetic despite all his uncertainties is one of the show's strengths. I appreciate creator Hideaki Anno's work, and he has real talent for composition. He doesn't attempt to explain every single thing in Evangelion, and this way of leaving off unexplained is commendable. I think Hideaki Anno's way of giving explicit details of the strict minimum keeps the story interesting and maintain the story flow uninterrupted. On my side, I tend to show too little, not show enough, and my editor often scolds me my lack of clarity, which I disagree, to be honest with you. Wholeheartedly, I disagree with that. I think Jujutsu Kaisen, if anything, you could throw the argument that it over-explains everything. Like, yeah, there's maybe a few things like the zones and how shit like that works or whatever, but for the most part, no, I disagree wholeheartedly. I think that's more of modesty coming from the author. How did you come up with Jujutsu Kaisen's story? I went through a difficult time making short stories that didn't really lead anywhere. At the time, many big shot series and Jump were ending, like Naruto, Bleach, etc. It was nerve-wracking, and I kept wondering what the magazine would become. Thankfully, My Hero Academia made its appearance, and my mind was immediately put at ease. The energy was still there. It gave me a motivation boost and made me realize I would need to be more dynamic at the same time, which I wholeheartedly remember that time and agree completely. Like, I remember when those series was ending and we only had One Piece, I was like, yo, what's going on? And they started doing the purge. They got rid of Toriko, Gintama, and they killed Chikami. I was like, what are they doing? So I definitely agree. And when My Hero came and it became a staple and shit like that, that's when I started feeling like, okay, I see what's going on. It's not completely shifting away. Like, okay. When I showed my initial project to my editor, he told me it was too dark and wouldn't suit a shonen magazine. I was about to give up when he suggested that I change my initial story setting to a school one. I really didn't want to at first, but I had nothing to lose. And so the pilot of the series, Jujutsu Kaisen 0, came to be. I read Jujutsu Kaisen 0. That shit is awesome. And honestly, I really like the vibe more. That was even more darker than the Jujutsu Kaisen we got now. Did the fact that the story happens in the school setting change a lot of elements? That's correct. These alterations gave me the opportunity to change my way of writing manga and learn to focus more on my characters. Beforehand, I would usually think of stories in terms of plot only. I couldn't understand at all those manga writers who claimed to in their interviews that they felt like their characters were moving by themselves. I always thought, what the hell are they talking about? Yeah, focusing in, like when I'm writing my story, and I'm not trying to plug my story or anything, I'm just, giving my examples and whatnot. When I write my story and I'm coming up with the characters and stuff, I kind of almost create a whole life for these characters. I think about what makes them tick. I think about what makes them laugh. When certain people are around, how do they react? I give a whole life to these characters, and that is very, very important, because you could have the greatest plot in the world, but if you have boring ass characters, you got a great plot with boring ass characters. Talking about myself, I always thought about it in terms of plot at the beginning, in the middle, while before I would even think about the character's involvement. When I had no choice but to change everything all at once, I had to revise my storyboard fast while disregarding any pre-established storyline. It changed my way of thinking greatly. From there, I decided to make other characters evolve around the protagonist, Yuta Okutsu, and followed suit with developing their interactions. The experience was educational. Jujutsu Kaisen 0 and Jujutsu Kaisen are both set in the same universe and some characters look alike. Was it difficult to start a new manga with a different protagonist without making it repetitive? I never thought that this story I made for Jump Giga would end up becoming a long-running manga and weekly Shonen Jump. Where I was concerned, the manga was ending at 4 chapters, but seeing how none of my other projects seemed to cut it, my editor proposed that I reuse the same concept. This suggestion gave me another opportunity to look closer closely into the shonen basics. The one thing I knew for certain going in was that I wouldn't continue Yuta Okutsu's story. Instead, I wanted a brand new hero. I wanted something that new readers would find easier to get into, but also a manga which compiled with the shonen rules. With that in mind, I revised the story and finally got the green light. Are there any specific rules you had to follow to adapt your manga to Weekly Shonen Jump? Authors that want to get in Jump one day, you never know. Listen closely. I try to use elements that I liked in popular manga that I read. Looking at it that way, the basic structure of Jujutsu Kaisen's first chapter is close to Bleach's first chapter, although the rules governing Jujutsu Kaisen world look more similar to the Naruto world. In Bleach, the protagonist gets his powers after meeting a young girl. The events happen in a similar fashion in Jujutsu Kaisen, although this time the main character meets a boy instead. I added my own twist, like having the hero swallowing a curse finger to absorb power, for example. This kind of plotline has been used in manga for a long time now, although with manga such as Dragon Quest: The Adventures of Dai, we had the concept of the young boy with a hidden power inside him. It's just part of the shonen formula. This dude knows his stuff. When we look at Naruto, the protagonist is discriminated against because of the power of the Nine Tails which resides in him. On my side, the hero gets his power from a curse it's impossible to get along with. Now, how will Yuji manage his new life with such a horrible curse? Did you plan Jujutsu Kaisen's entire story from start to finish? That's another interesting one. Like, is the ending planned out? While creating the stories from Jujutsu Kaisen 0 was my starting point, I still needed to think of the story in the long term when the story came to adapt my short story into a long-running manga for Weekly Shonen Jump. I'm the type of person who worries if they don't have the faintest idea of what comes next. I need to know what my end goal is in order to set course without hesitation. Consequently, I already know the ending and what will happen to Yuji and the others. That doesn't mean that everything is set in stone though. It's important to keep your story open, just in case. So yeah, that's great to hear. Like, not no Hiromashima, I'm making it up as I go along, guys. Like, no, Jujutsu Kaisen is set. Although if shit changes up, you can change it up too. You mentioned My Hero Academia as an inspiration earlier. Yes, it happened at a time where I kept wondering what could be done to revive the shonen formula for both Jumps and my sake. Thinking that way made me see other popular shonen under a new light. Back then, Attack on Titan was making waves and Naruto had just ended. Yes, this dude's memory, yes, that's what was going on. I was wondering where things were going. Then My Hero started in the magazine, and I realized then that Jump had the strength to breathe new life into its gears. I also became conscious that I would need to shift gears if I wanted to stand in the same arena. Yeah. I remember all of that shit. And by the way, there's a crossover with My Hero Academia. Small little thing, I believe, where they like traded art or something like that. So this is what the next question is referring to. Was it yours or your editor's idea to have a promotional crossover between you and Kohei Horikoshi, the author of My Hero Academia? It was our editor's idea. Honestly, I love mangakas. Just picturing the career in my mind has always been enough to make me daydream, and to me, mangaka in general have a certain coolness about them. Mr. Horikoshi strikes me particularly. He's really a representation of the modern writer to me. I respected him a lot already reading his manga, but my admiration increased even more after meeting him in real life. After that, I would always ask my editor if he heard anything about Mr. Horikoshi every time we met. Since I wouldn't stop talking about him, our editors decided to make this promotional marketing project between both manga. Apparently, one of the reasons why Mr. Horikoshi accepted to participate was because he reads Jujutsu Kaisen. That made me very happy, and that's really freaking awesome. Although I would have loved a crossover with Bleach, especially how much this author appreciates Kubo's work. That would have been awesome and very, very fitting. His editor, Mr. Katama, I was only asking for a commentary for the opening banner, but Mr. Horikoshi decided instead to send us illustrations for Jujutsu Kaisen. We did tell him beforehand that he didn't have to spend too much time on this crossover because of his tight schedule, yet he did. On top of that, Mr. Horikoshi wasted no time sending in those illustrations and said he didn't want to disturb the release schedule for this project. Can you imagine? A well-known writer like him not only agreed to promote my work, but also showed a lot of modesty. I'm such a fan of his manga as I am a fan of the man himself. That is pretty dope, I'm not gonna lie. Getting a cosign like that is awesome. How would you introduce Yuji Itadori to someone who doesn't know Jujutsu Kaisen? I gave him the traits of a shonen protagonist, but in my own way. It was hard. I didn't want him to be one of those super nice protagonists, Emma, Promise Neverland, because I find that a little annoying. It's one thing I don't really like in classic shonen. With Yuji, since I put a part of me in his character, you could say that he's more like everyone else, a normal person in many ways. He wasn't easy to create, but you can really feel his character in manga, which is why I compare a lot of traits traits I've seen in Yuji to Ichigo Kurosaki. Like, that's, I think, what Kubo was going for too. How do you create your characters? What elements particularly feel important to you? I don't have any preconceived notion of right or wrong. I don't believe that justice itself could ever be completely flawless. I mean, it's impossible for people to be 100% right. For that very reason, every single character I create has some kind of flaw. When you look at the curses in the manga, I made them as repulsive as possible because I want them to come off as scary. Job succeeded. They look really, really nasty. The enemy side leaves a strong impression while reading your work. Their words have as much of an impact on the readers as the protagonists do. Do you like villains in general? I mostly like characters with strong ideologies like Shinobu Sensui from YuYu Hakusho. Shoutouts to Shinobu Sensui again. Or Stain in My Hero Academia. Shoutouts to Stain as well. Their ideals become full-fledged dogmas for them. You can easily understand what makes them act the way they do. The only thing you've got to keep in mind with characters like that is to not make the reasoning behind their actions too abstract for the readers. Yeah, you gotta sympathize with them. Did you learn digital art while taking editing courses in university? Not at all. It happened while I was working as Mr. Kano's assistant on his manga, Kiss of Death. Mr. Kano himself advocates drawing by hand, but since I'm a little bit of a slob, I don't want to touch someone else's art board. When the choice was offered to me, I decided to go for digital art just so I would be able to correct the mistakes I knew I would be making. How was your work schedule during the week? Do you have any assistants? I have 4 assistants who come in on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday to help me with background and various special effects. They work on the pages I've already prepared in advance. I usually drop my draft on Tuesday mornings. Apparently it was supposed to be dropped earlier. I started preparing the art boards for the next chapter from that moment till the following Thursday. I draw digitally, but my assistants can choose whichever method suits them most. That's interesting because they definitely have more so transitioned into digital art. What do you do in your free time? Usually I go to the movies. I really love the movie Whiplash from producer Damien Chazelle. I went to see it in theaters and found it very good. While I work, I usually have movies from Netflix or Amazon playing in the background. Again, that's very much like me. I always have, when I'm editing or doing something, I have something in the background. I really love American TV shows like Dr. House, who doesn't go easy on the main characters. I used to read a lot of manga in high school and university, but since I started Jujutsu Kaisen, I haven't been able to spend much time on reading as before. Right now, I try to read new stuff as often as I can to enrich my thoughts and ideas. What are some titles you're currently reading? I'm trying to find out more about the books Yoshihiro Togashi used as inspiration for his work. Again, shouts out to Yoshihiro Togashi. I've heard that he loves Junji Ito's works. I'd previously read his well-known titles, but I'm only currently reading more of his various published works. I also love reading one-shots, particularly the ones from Tomoko Yamashita or Takako Shimura. I hadn't read those in quite some time, but I've gone back to doing so recently. As I read, I revisit the structure of this kind of story, and it's helpful. I'm scared focusing mostly on longer series is going to make me forget how to finalize a story in one chapter. I also read anthologies and other collections of short stories from time to time. Unfortunately, since I don't have a lot of free time, I usually focus on manga. If you had a power, what would it be? I feel like I wouldn't be that talented. There are high chances I would die young if I was an exorcist shaman. Honestly, I don't need to be powerful. I just want a power that helps me survive. I would rather not end like a support character. It doesn't look all that thrilling. What about your pen name? I thought it was best not to take myself too seriously, so I used the kanji Akuta, which means waste, for my family's name. For the surname, I went with Gege because I love repetitive sounds. Do you have anything to say to the French readers? Because this was a French interview. My manga will be translated and read overseas. I still can't believe it. My passion for manga is what led me to my career today. I've loved them since childhood. I hope my manga will have an influence on you readers, whether big or small. And holy cow, that was a lot of reading I just did. I did not expect to be reading that long. Curious what you guys think about this, the influences. Does this make you more excited for the series or want to give it a shot? Jujutsu Kaisen, freaking awesome. Love it. Yeah, I think I'm burnt out from that. Shout out to the author though, because to be honest with you, reading all that really made me resonate. Like, I think they need to do more of that. Like, it kind of made me more care about the series, and I already liked it and care about it or whatnot, but seeing that, I feel like a connection with the author now because I'm so similar to this author based on everything that was said. Is like, yeah. That's all I have for this one though. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. If you liked anything I had to say or enjoyed the video, drop me a like. I'd greatly appreciate it. And if you want more from me, make sure to subscribe. Follow me on Twitter, Instagram. Hit that bell to get all notifications. And if you want to follow any of my other social media, links in the description below. I'm ForneverWorld, and as always, people, have an awesome day. And remember the golden rule. Anime and manga for life, boy. Have an awesome day. Peace in.
Everything good always comes to an end. If you stab me in my back, we can never make amends. Trying to move to acceptance, hard to accept it. Mistakes like mirrors, gotta reflect it. I don't wanna fucking leave, but I gotta leave. Leave the maybes to the crazies. Maybe one day there I go admitting something in a subtle way. No more copies, leave without a trace.